to be aware of that. So good evening and welcome. This is our one of our series of programs for the 2022 Graduate and Undergraduate Research, Innovation, Symposium and Exhibition Conference that features the work of our graduate and undergraduate students. And we have been quite intentional to invite speakers to share with us, to talk about the importance of research and the practical and necessary ways that all of us are to participate in our society, whether it's through politics, through education, through performance, through social work, through education. There are multiple ways. And so we're so pleased tonight to be joined by our very own Virginia Senator, Dr. Mamie Locke. And so the program will be moderated by Dr. Stephen Magu from our Political Science Department. And please do place your questions in the Q&A, and we will address them at the designated time. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to put you in the capable hands of Dr. Stephen Magu and Senator Mamie Locke.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Miller. If it's okay with you and everyone who is joining us, I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce our speaker today, because I think we are fortunate to be hearing from her, from all the accomplishments that that are going to be evident, and definitely everything that Dr. Locke is going to share with us. So Dr. Locke, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us at this undergraduate and graduate research innovation symposium and exhibition. We call it RISE2022, and we are hopefully rising. The theme is From Impact to Meaning, 21st Century Research, and I could not think of anyone better who combines both research and public service than perhaps you. And so for everyone who is participating, thank you for deciding to spend your time with us here this evening. I am sure you will walk away from this being motivated to be more participatory citizens, but also see yourself in the in those kinds of situations where you can impact your life and those lives of others here in Virginia and wherever you might be. Before I introduce Dr. Locke, I wanted to thank Dr. Miller, Dean Miller now, and members of the RISE committee for the hard work, the programming, the guests, the speakers, communications, changes, everything. Thank you very much. And as Dr. Miller, Dean Miller said, please place questions in the Q&A. Now, let me introduce our speaker this evening. I don't even know whether to say Professor, Doctor, Senator, because I think all of those are appropriate here. But Senator Locke, who is a member of the Virginia delegation, is the Senator for District 2, which she has represented since 2004. And until spring 2022, she was a full professor of political science at Hampton University. I am delighted to say that she hired me out of graduate school, and that was, I think, an amazing opportunity to work with a public servant and someone who is really interested and dedicated to research. Dr. Locke was also the Dean of the School of Liberal Arts at Hampton University. She obtained her Bachelor's of Arts in History and Political Science from Tougaloo College, her MA and PhD in Political Science from Clark at Atlanta University. And she's been an award-winning multi-year research grantee from the National Science Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and other grants. And if you literally look at all the awards and honors that she has, it will take this whole hour to actually just mention them. So, and so before she was elected to the Virginia delegation, Dr. Locke was elected to the Hampton City Council. She served as vice mayor and then mayor. And in the Virginia Senate, Dr. Locke has chaired many committees, including, for example, the education, the freedom of information, the housing commission, and served on many other different commissions, and other studies and committees and so on. So I can't even imagine that we could have a better speaker than. Now, in terms of her publications, I was actually just looking this up. I wasn't even quite, I hadn't seen it before, but a book chapter in a book entitled Get Your Knee Off Our Necks, From Slavery to Black Lives Matter. And I am sure we are going to, well, I'm not going to go there, but Dr. Locke is an amazing person, and I'm sure she will have great wisdom for us. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Locke to speak to us about various topics.
Thank you very much, Dr. Magu. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay, it says that it's disabled.
Can you try one more time, please? I'm sorry.
Okay,
Did it work?
it did.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I am having difficulty finding my presentation. Dr. Miller, how do I find my presentation?
So I would suggest to stop sharing. And then on your computer to pull up the presentation. Is it in a PowerPoint or a Word doc?
It's a PowerPoint.
I would go on and open up PowerPoint first. And then hopefully you should see your presentation in the list of recent presentations.
Okay, did
And
that.
then, okay, so then once you have it open, don't go into slideshow yet. Once you have the presentation open, then now you could share your screen. Highlight the PowerPoint presentation. Do you have any video or audio in the presentation?
No.
Okay, and so you would share.
Okay.
And let's see if we're able to see it. Are you sharing the screen yet or not yet?
Okay.
Okay, great. And so now you just go, if you click on presentation mode, you can click on slideshow. And then from beginning. There we go. We see it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Sorry for that little glitch, folks, but what I wanted to talk to you about, I'm going to get in quite a bit, and I'm going to try to do speed through. I want to talk about leadership, advocacy, and just throw in it's just one little slide on social media, because I know quite a few of you undergraduates are into social media, and it's just going to be one little thing on social media. But I want to start with what is leadership. And I'm going to read these first two slides and then kind of go through the rest of them. At the age of 7, a young boy and his family were forced out of their home. The boy had to work to support his family. At 9, his mother died. He wanted to go to law school, but had no education. At 22, he lost his job as a store clerk. At 23, he ran for the state legislature and lost. He then went into business, but failed, which left him in debt, and it took him 17 years to pay off this debt. At 27, he had a nervous breakdown. At 29, he tried to be Speaker of the state legislature, but lost. At 31, he was defeated in his attempt to become an elector. By 35, he had been defeated twice in a run for Congress. He finally won, but lost his reelection. At 41, his 4-year-old son died. At 42, he was rejected as a prospective land officer. At 45, he lost a bid for Senate. At 47, he lost a bid to be vice president. At 49, he ran for the Senate again and lost. At 51, he was elected president of the United States. Do you have any idea who I'm talking about? And it's basically a rhetorical question, because I'm going to tell you who it is. That was Abraham Lincoln. And it appears as though, despite all of these hardships throughout his life, he never gave up, but you learned a lot of lessons about leadership in all of these ups and downs in his life. One being, he never allowed failure to determine his future. And he was persistent, and persistence paid off in the end, because he ultimately became the 16th president of the United States. He was determined, and he had a lot of determination, and he was very patient, and he worked hard. And those are qualities that individuals need to have as a leader. And Lincoln certainly had all of those qualities. Now, I don't want anybody in the audience to get me wrong. Abraham Lincoln was not one of my favorite presidents of the United States. He was not the great emancipator that people claimed him to be. He certainly wanted, he did not want slavery to end. His job as president of the United States, he felt, was to reconnect the Union. That was what he wanted to do. And he wanted, if slavery did end, he wanted Black folks to be shipped out of the United States, not to remain. So he was not this great emancipator that he was shown to be over the course of the years. But there was a book written about him that I'm going to get to in a few minutes that I have taken a lot from about him as a leader. So basically, what is leadership? Leaders are not managers. Leaders are people who do the right thing. Managers are people who do things right. And there is a very clear distinction between the two. Leaders help themselves and others do the right thing. And so we're going to look at some adjectives for leaders, and you can determine whether or not you see yourself as a leader, or do you see yourself as a manager? And if you see yourself as a manager, you may want to rethink how you want to change yourself into becoming a leader as opposed to being a manager. Because leaders set direction, they inspire, they're visionary, they're dynamic, they're vibrant, they're skillful. And those are not necessary qualities that are given to managers. I read this book several years ago by Donald Phillips about Lincoln on leadership. And Lincoln had some very good qualities when it came to determining what it took to be a good leader. And he was a wartime leader, because as soon as he was elected president of the United States, 7 states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. And shortly after he was inaugurated, 6 more states withdrew from the Union. So he had to regroup and figure out what one had to do to become a wartime president. And so this book kind of laid out how he strategized as a president to conduct a war over the course of the next 5 years, 4.5 years, actually. And I'm going to kind of walk through some of those strategies that he used. And one of the first was Lincoln kind of went out of the White House. He did not conduct that war from the White House. He said that one had to get out of the office and circulate among the troops. That is, you couldn't conduct the war from the White House. You had to go out and about and among where the troops were. You had to build strong alliances and persuade rather than coerce. That's the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss tends to coerce rather than persuade. And a leader is honest and has integrity. And those are the best policies for a good leader. And a leader never acts out of vengeance or spite. That is, I'm going to get that person back for what they did. That's not what a good leader does. And the person has to have the courage to handle unjust criticism. A leader is going to be criticized. And Lincoln was always criticized. Sometimes he felt unjustly. But he was called names because of the way that he looked. And sometimes he was the object of jealousy, envy, malice. He heard it, he dealt with it, and he moved on because he had a job to do. And the only way to get that job done was to hear what was said and move on. He also felt that a good leader had to be a master of paradox, that is, appearing to be contradictory. He was considered to be someone who was charismatic, consistent and flexible, and someone who was trusting and compassionate, but demanding and tough. Somebody who was a risk taker and innovative, yet patient and calculating as a leader. He was somebody who he felt that a leader had to exercise a strong and decisive hand. That is, you had to make a decision, even if that decision was hard to make. And you couldn't waffle in making a decision. And at the end of the day, as the president of the United States, he had to make the decision. He couldn't depend on the vice president, and he couldn't depend on the generals to make the decisions. He could listen to what they had to say, and he could listen to the members of his cabinet, but ultimately he was the person who had to make the decisions. He you could be a good leader by being led. He listened to individuals and he would allow them to lead him to the right answers, and that's what a good leader does. He set goals and he was results oriented. That is, you have to get results at the end of the day. And one of my favorite chapters in the book on leadership was to keep searching until you find your grant. Lincoln went through any number of generals throughout the course of the war because he felt that they were not getting the job done, that they were not strong enough to fight the war the way that he wanted it fought. And he was, as I told you from the beginning, he was out and about on the battlefields often, and he witnessed Grant on the battlefield. But Grant had a reputation, and Grant's reputation was that he was a drunk, and that he was hot-tempered, and that he was argumentative. But one of the things that Lincoln witnessed about Grant when he saw him on the battlefield was that he fought, and that he was methodical, and that he got the job done. And that time that he appointed him to be the commanding general for the Union forces was in 1864. The war was over 9 months later, in 1865. And Lincoln felt that he had made the right decision in making Grant the commanding general of the Union Army. And he felt that in order to making that decision, he kept searching until he had found the right person to lead the war effort. That is, to keep searching until you find the right people to put in place to do the job for you. And encourage innovation, allow people to fail, allow them to be innovative, to be a catalyst for change, especially in a world that's filled with changing technology. Today's change can be obsolete tomorrow. So you have to allow people to be innovative, to think outside the box. And Lincoln was a master at public speaking and telling stories. He influenced people through convention and storytelling. And people hated his storytelling, but he would often tell stories in order to get a point across. And he would preach vision and continually reaffirm it. And one should always watch body language. You tell a lot by your body language and preparation times. And you should also know when not to speak. Sometimes something does not need to be said. And you should always practice when not to do that. Learn specific leadership skills. A good leader knows how to empower people, how to inspire people, how to lead with change, and how to share the vision in a good and positive way. Managers don't know how to do that. They simply know how to manage. They don't know how to empower or to inspire or to share vision. I put 3 people here because these are individuals who were inspiring leaders, who were good leaders, who could share vision and inspire change. They didn't just talk the talk, they walked the walk. Gandhi, Robert Kennedy, and Barbara Jordan. Gandhi spent his adult life living what he preached to others, was committed to nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience. He inspired many people, including Martin Luther King. Robert Kennedy made the statement that some people see things as they are and ask why. I see things that never were and ask why not. Life is, and Barbara Jordan made an outstanding speech that I heard back in 1988, where she said that life is too large to hang out a sign that says for men only, that women had to be a part of this culture, of this society, and an integral part of this society. She was the first African-American woman to be elected to Congress from Texas, and was a part of the hearings for Nixon's impeachment. So one has to either lead, follow, or get out of the way. Which one are you going to be? Are you going to be the leader? Are you going to be the follower? Or are you just going to, be somebody who's in the way? Be a leader, not a manager. So think about this. What are you passionate about? What really matters to you? And as you think about that, advocate for that which matters to you, that which you are passionate about. Because advocacy is the process of pleading or arguing in favor of something, for a cause, for a policy, for an interest, that's the only way you can make change, to make change happen. These are some issues that have come up over the course of the last 4 to 5 years, particularly in the last 2 years. Reproductive rights as human rights for women. There's a case before the Supreme Court now that was argued in December that may very well overturn Roe versus Wade. States are now in the process of eliminating reproductive rights and choices for women. Despite the advocacy of women across this country to protect their reproductive rights, to protect their choices for reproductive rights. There's a bill that was just signed by the governor of Florida, the Don't Say Gay bill, and Disney came out in opposition to that bill. So what does the governor do? He stands against his largest employer, which is Disney, in the state, simply because of culture wars that are going on in this country. These are issues that you need to be cognizant of and aware of. Is this an issue that you're concerned about? Are you concerned about LGBTQ rights? If you are, be an advocate. Voter suppression is alive and well in this country. We cannot get the John Lewis voter rights bill out of Congress simply because there are states that are passing bills that are suppressing your right to vote. We cannot get a constitutional amendment passed in this state simply because there are those who want to suppress your right to vote. One should ask yourself, why? Isn't it a democratic right that you're entitled to have the right to vote for an individual of your choice? Why do individuals not want that enshrined in the state constitution? What we have been hearing over the course of the last 3 to 4 years is this whole issue of critical race theory. And there was a bill in the current Virginia General Assembly dealing with this whole issue of teaching what were known as inherently divisive concepts. That is, we don't want to teach inherently divisive concepts, tying it to critical race theory, which is not taught in K through 12 in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But we hear it all the time. And note in the corner of this last slide here, that it's been talked about over and over and over again, at least 400 times in 2021 on Fox News about critical race theory. And it was talked about, and I'm going to get to that in a second, with in the hearing of Judge Brown Jackson about critical race theory and how she feels about that. You know, what does that have to do with her being a judge, on the Supreme Court of the United States? Critical race theory is not taught in public schools. Critical race theory is a law school course primarily, although it is taught in some undergraduate courses. That is a wedge issue that's taught, that's being used, to rile up certain parents, to comfort them at the expense of the majority. Your voice matters. Let me repeat, your voice matters. If you don't use it, Senator Yvonne Miller said before her death, if you don't use your voice, you're going to find yourself going through a second post-Reconstruction period. And oftentimes, as I stand on the floor of the Senate, I am defending ending voter suppression, ending things like inherently divisive concepts. What does that mean? And why are we even talking about things like that in 2021 or 2022? Why are we even talking about issues like that? And why in 2020, in the 21st century, in the second decade of the millennium, are we still first? The first this or the first that? Why are we still being first at anything? First African-American president, vice president, or the first African-American president that created all kinds of chaos in this country, or the first African-American woman to be nominated to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States. Why is that such an issue? Or why is there such pushback on her nomination, which she handled extraordinarily well? When Judge Kavanaugh blew up at the Judiciary Committee members, she did not. He still gets confirmed, without any issues, but with the exception of 3 individuals on one side of the aisle, they will be voting no to her nomination. An extraordinarily qualified individual. I only have just this one slide on social media. And I only want to bring it up because I know that many of you use it, and you use it consistently and all the time. But be careful what you put out there in cyberspace. Because once you put it out there, you can't take it back. One of the things that Lincoln also talked about or what was talked about in terms of Lincoln and his leadership, is that when he would get angry with his generals, he would write them these long letters, and then he would put it in his pocket and never send it. Because he would get out all of his anger and his frustration with what they were doing in the letter. And then he would pocket it and never send it. So one should be careful about pushing the send button on that email, or putting things in all caps, or hitting the send button on that text, or what pictures that you're putting out there, on Instagram, or whatever you're putting out there in cyberspace. And what this particular slide says is, A says, and this is from an employer, assume that we will read what you write. That's A. B, remember that we pay your salary. C, make the connection between A and B. Any questions is what the employer says. Good leaders know how and when to use social media. And when you go for interviews, you can be assured that employers, graduate schools, organizations are looking at your social media. I wanted to end with a quote from Frantz Fanon. Dr. Fanon was a psychiatrist, a philosopher, a revolutionary, and author from Martinique, and was very active in the colonial revolts that were taking place in colonies that were trying to obtain their freedom from France. He stated that each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or portray it. And I say that to you, young people, that you must discover your mission, fulfill it, or portray it. You must become advocates for what's important to you. You must use your voice. You must understand what it is that's important to you and be the change that you want to see. Otherwise, as Senator Miller said, we will find ourselves fighting a civil rights movement all over again. Again, lead, follow, or get out of the way. I will now take questions.
All right. First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Locke, for a really insightful opportunity for especially younger leaders to think about not just the now, but also the future, but also what the future looks like and what perhaps the lessons that they can take going into the future. A number of our students, I'm not certain how many graduate students we have, but I see quite a number of graduating seniors, and I think this will be especially very important conversations and thoughts to keep in mind. So I see a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I encourage other students to continue posting their questions. George Giles has a longer question. Do you think the lack of women involvement in politics or economics is due to capitalism and European dominance, or is it a lack of trust in the next generation that women can inspire a better world? And says he finds it absurd that in 400 years we haven't had a female president, and why does this only happen in America?
That is a very, very good question, and one that I've been pondering for quite some time, because many other Western countries and even some non-Western countries have had female leaders. I actually wrote, did a presentation on that after Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. And one of the things I found was that women tend to be a bit more misogynist, and sometimes men can be, when it comes to whether or not they will support a woman in leadership roles. And what I found was that women will only support a woman so far when it comes to leadership. And their vision of a president was not, that image of a president was that of a male figure in the United States, not a female. It's okay for even an African-American man, it's okay to be president of the United States, but not a woman. And it's okay for Hillary Clinton to work for a male as president of the United States, but not for her to ascend to that position. And the issue was that women are not viewed in the role of leader in that capacity, because women cannot make the same kinds of decisions that men can make, that is in the United States, of determining whether or not the United States can go to war, in determining whether or not the United States can, whether, you know, even if a woman is the head of a bank, you know, in determining financial issues for the country, in determining, again, the economic prowess of the country. That's simply, as I looked at the data, women did not see a woman making those kinds of decisions in the same manner that they saw a man making those decisions. Women can work for men. They can be the secretary in the various other they can be the Secretary of Commerce. They can be the Secretary of State, as Hillary Clinton had been, but not necessarily take on that leadership responsibility. And I forgot the other part of, you know, his question.
The other part was is women involvement in politics, economics due to capitalism and European dominance, or a lack of trust in the next generation of men. Find it absurd that we haven't had a female president, and why this only happens in America.
Women, the reason why there are fewer women that are in elected office is because women come into politics later than men. And that's changing somewhat. And it's generally because women are raising their children. And men will get into politics a little bit earlier because they are not raising the children in the same manner that women are raising the children. So normally women will wait until children are either in high school or out of school altogether before they make the decision to actually run for public office. That's changing somewhat, but there still is the tendency to wait until later to run for public office.
All right, thank you, Dr. Locke. This another question by an anonymous attendee. I'm going to combine maybe this with something I was thinking about, which is thinking about, so the question asks, how far back do they look at your social media? But I was also thinking from the perspective of a public, from the perspective of an elected official, what would you necessarily ask students who want to go into leadership to avoid? Like, what are the, glaring, I think, maybe mistakes that students might want to avoid?
I mean, you mean on social media? Is that the question?
On social media, but also in general in life, like, speeding tickets or something.
I mean, shoot, I get speeding tickets, but I would think that you don't, if you're interested in going into public life, this is not the business for somebody who is thin-skinned. It is not the life for someone who has skeletons in your closet that you don't want people to know about, because the media will come after you. And if you run for an office and you have an opponent, they do what is known as opposition research. They go looking for stuff. And that stuff can be anything. It can be something as small as, did the person declare bankruptcy 30 years ago? Or did you get a speeding ticket? Or did you bounce a check? And they will go combing through your social media. And any number of people have been caught on social media issues. I'm not I'm not big on social media. I do use Twitter. I've been wearing the governor out, on Twitter, but I'm very careful and measured in what I say. And I make sure that what I say is factual, and that what I say can be backed up. And I'm not just spouting off. And that's what I say about be careful before you hit the send button. That the information that you have is true. And so again, this is not a profession for the faint at heart. And I got some very good advice when I first ran for public office, and my first public office was at the local level, from former Governor Doug Wilder, who said, don't worry about what people say about you in the newspaper. He said, they're going to always talk about you. He said, if you get caught up in what's being said about you, you will never, ever get your job done. Read it, put it aside, and go about what's happening. And that was one of the things that was in the Lincoln book on leadership. That is, you can't worry about what's being said about you. You need to move on.
Wonderful. I think that's an excellent answer. So in the interest of time, we have one more question. If there's a final question that anyone is thinking about, please post it. Ms. Morton is asking, based on what you've seen from your younger colleagues, how likely do you feel that more progressive laws and policies will be passed in the near future?
We did a magnificent job between 2019 and 2021. We passed a number of progressive pieces of legislation. We did criminal justice reform, where we passed no-knock warrants. We passed laws where individuals could not stop simply because there was the odor of marijuana in somebody's car. We passed legislation where, no chokeholds, those were barred. We also passed, eliminated a bunch of voter suppression laws. We eliminated the voter ID laws. We passed early voting laws in Virginia. We also passed drop boxes where individuals could, put their ballots in drop boxes. This year, what goes into effect is same-day voter registration, where a person can register to vote on election day and vote the same day. So we've passed any number of progressive legislation that makes it easier to vote in Virginia, that we've eliminated some very egregious criminal justice laws in the Commonwealth. So a lot has been done, but there was an effort to try to roll back a number of those things, but we were able to push back on those efforts to try to roll back some things. So I think that a number of younger legislators are coming in with some really great ideas for reform. So I think that what we need are more people like some of you out there who can come in and bring your ideas. And people also can send us ideas that we can transform into legislation. So that's how we get some of the legislation that we've been able to put into place.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Locke. So, ladies, gentlemen, everyone who is attending, I think there was a website that was called Run for Something. I think people should run for and contribute to the laws that affect their well-being. One of the courses that I teach, I ask students how they think politics affects them, and sometimes you give the answer, it doesn't affect me. And so clearly we do see that politics affects us in everything that we do. And so whether you're contributing ideas to Senator Locke and even perhaps volunteering, now volunteering people for Dr. Locke, but also things like internships and so on, I think these are the ways in which we participate in government that makes the laws under which we must live. So in the interest of time, I am really grateful, and I want to pass my gratitude to Dr. Locke for taking this time. We had hoped that you'd be in person, but you're back in session, and so you have to do the work that is necessary to push this Commonwealth forward. And so we thank you for even taking this time out to speak to us, to our students, to some of our faculty. And I will be in touch with you regarding other matters, but really thank you very much. For everyone who is attending, Dr. Miller reminds me to remind you to be to join us tomorrow at 12:30 for a conversation with Dr. Kizimeke Corbett, who was a lead scientist for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. So again, you see, we are doing amazing things, and I want to encourage us to continue to do amazing things together. So thank you very much, Dr. Locke. I will see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.